Welcome to Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, the podcast that deals with all things mental health. We talk to professionals, survivors, and loved ones about their sometimes informative, sometimes uplifting, and sometimes tragic stories. I'm your host of the show, Todd Rennebaum, advocate, recovering addict, experienced sufferer of depression and anxiety, and author of the children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. I am Todd Rennebaum, your host. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you tune into the future episodes. I've got some great guests lined up. Speaking of which, I'm going to be speaking with Steve. He is in recovery. He's a buddy of mine. He's written a new book. He actually, at one point, lived on Hastings Streets in Vancouver. For those of you that don't know, that's the most notorious street in Canada for quote-unquote junkies. He's now living his best life. He's got beautiful kids and a beautiful lady, and he is helping others in recovery. So we're going to be talking to Steve. Honestly, I'm going to be talking to a few people about recovery in the next little while here. But don't worry, they're all really interesting people. They've got very different stories, and I'm going to try not to have them back to back, but if they are, don't worry. They're going to be great episodes. In the weeks to come, I'll also be speaking to a lady named Cece. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce that. And she has a new company. It's online. You can become a member, and it's all peer support groups for all types of different ailments and disorders and things. And it's really cheap. You go on, you can go on there all day long and just be in support groups and help each other. And I think it's a really wonderful company, especially when you have to wait months to see someone professional. So there's CC, and I will also be speaking with a fellow named Mark, and he helps people in recovery, and his specialty is working with psychedelics and addiction and mental health. So he uses psychedelics to help people in those situations. I'm really excited about that one because I'm really excited to learn about more of that stuff. And next week I'm going to be speaking to a good friend of mine, Haley. I actually spoke with her on episode 32. That's the first time I ever talked to her, really. And we became friends ever since then. We met on Instagram, and back then she had a few thousand followers, and now she kind of blew up to about 18,000 followers. She was making funny reels and funny videos and funny memes about different mental health issues, but she's kind of recently gotten in trouble with Instagram, and so now she's on TikTok, mind.over.mood, and she's still making funny videos and funny memes and things, and you can follow her there. Haley lives with bipolar and schizoaffective disorder, and I think an eating disorder at one time. Anyway, we catch up and we have a nice time and a few laughs. So listen to that. That is next week. Oh, okay. So now, this week, I'm speaking with Izzy. And I met Izzy on TikTok. And Izzy's handle is SoberIzzyXOXO. She goes on twice a day live, sober dinner and sober breakfast. And she just talks sobriety with her live audience. Izzy is in a very early recovery. I think she only has about 6 or 7 months sober, I believe. It doesn't much matter. She's just getting her feet wet with sobriety. And her lives are amazing. She's very open and very honest and very charming. So we talk about that, and we talk about some trauma she's experienced, and which kind of started the whole addiction process. She's got a really harrowing story. She's super interesting and just a doll. So without further ado, I give you Izzy.
You know what? I actually had a sort of awesome experience, and I didn't expect it to be awesome, but I went clubbing with one of my friends, and they were absolutely wasted, and I got to be the one taking care of them. And they were leaning all over me, and I was like, wow, this is I don't mind this. It was sort of like paying it forward. Someday they're gonna get sober too, but it felt good to be in the position of able to care for someone for the first time, because usually I wasn't in a place to be doing that.
Right. Yeah. Same. I was always the last one to go to bed at a party, or
Or,
I'd come home
yeah.
from the club and just keep drinking.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, it would be like the crying, blacked out one, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, you are killing the butt." But
Yeah.
yeah, I was fun at
Well,
parties until I wasn't anymore.
well, do you mind talking a little bit about before getting sober? Some of your story and how. Well, first off, you're the American in London town, American Werewolf in London. Hey, have you seen that?
I have not. No.
Have you ever heard of it?
Mm-mm.
Oh, well,
American Werewolf in London, you said?
yeah, it's a horror movie from the 80s. Doesn't
Ooh,
matter.
I don't watch horror movies.
Yeah.
When I watch TV, I want escape. I don't want anything too real.
Right.
I watch a
Well,
lot of the Kardashians, I'm not gonna lie.
well, werewolves aren't real, so.
That's true.
But anyway,
That's true.
I know what you're saying. You want garbage
Yep.
TV.
Yep.
So anyway, what made you go to London?
Well, I've always liked traveling. I mean, I loved London from the first time I came here, and I was 16, and I was like deep in my Doctor Who phase, like so in all the nerd stuff, the Harry Potter, everything, and it was magical. It was like a kid in a candy shop with all the TARDISes everywhere. I don't know if your listeners know a lot about Doctor Who, but
I have no idea.
I do, and I can happily fill you in. No, that's not the subject of this.
You're 24 now,
Yeah,
so that was about
I'm
8 years
24
ago.
now.
Okay.
8 years ago, and it was like, oh my goodness, something lit up inside of me. It was magical. So then I decided to come back. High school was a wild journey. I don't know how much to get into, but I decided to come back partially because I wanted to get away. I grew up in a very small town, and I was like, London is this metropolis. Like there is so much here for me, and I was like, I want that. And it's also a lot cheaper on a practical side. It's a lot cheaper to go to school in the UK. So that was a
Oh,
major factor, but I don't know.
really?
It just
So is
felt
the
right at the time.
sorry to cut you off there. Is the but like rent and food and stuff like that, is that cheaper?
Honestly, during university, yes. They were going to
Oh,
charge me a ton, even after scholarships, to go to private schools in the US. Even state school was around the same price. So I was like, you know what? If I have this opportunity to travel, I'm just going to do it.
damn. Okay. So
Yeah.
so the adventure bug bit you, and you went to London.
Yep.
Is-
Had
to
no idea what was
uni,
going to happen. To uni, yes.
as they call it. What were you taking?
I did history.
Well,
Yeah.
that's appropriate for
Yeah.
ye old timey London.
Yeah, I was obsessed with it. Yeah, I would go to these historical buildings in London. I would get so excited about it. Uh, yeah,
um, I don't know if you
I
realize,
still
but
love it.
I'm in Canada. I don't know if you knew that or not.
I did not know that.
Oh,
Where in
okay.
Canada?
Indian Head, Saskatchewan.
I have
So,
not been. I've been to Nova Scotia and Quebec, but I've never
uh,
been.
have you ever heard of Saskatchewan?
I have.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Yeah, it's like one of the biggest places on earth that no one's ever heard of. But anyway, um, biggest places land area wise. Anyway,
Very
um,
cool.
so yeah, history is cool because growing up in this area, it's like the oldest building is like 80 years old.
Really?
Wow, it's a little older. It's like 100. It's not very old around here, right? Not like Europe where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
here's a grave from 1200s or
Yeah. Or this building is older than your country.
yeah, exactly.
It's wild.
We do have
It's very
indigenous population here, but
Well,
because
yeah.
their structures didn't last, right? So it's hard to
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, I should mention I have ADHD, so sometimes I think
Oh
I'm
my
waiting for an
goodness, don't
assessment.
worry.
Actually, I think I have ADHD, so sometimes I go off topic. But anyway,
That's okay. Me too. This will be wild.
you do have ADHD.
I was diagnosed. I've been diagnosed
Ah,
with a lot of things, and it's hard to tell like how much is trauma, how much is ADHD, how much is bipolar. It's kind of a mess. So I do go on
mhm.
tangents. You can be assured of that.
Okay. Well, I see you live, so I know.
So yeah.
So you're in university, and do you mind telling the story about meeting a gentleman?
Oh my lordy. I've actually never told this story like in a recorded way, and I will try and do it in a concise way. I met this boy. That's how it always begins, isn't it? And the truth is, when I got to London, I hadn't been diagnosed with bipolar. I was coming off a psychotic episode. I was doing very, very, very poorly, to say the least.
Wait.
And I met this. Hmm?
So were you already diagnosed with something before?
No.
No. So you had a
Oh, I
psychotic.
had been diagnosed with depression, anxiety. I had been diagnosed with many things, but they
Oh,
hadn't
okay.
realized it was bipolar.
Gotcha. So
Um,
you had a psychotic episode, but you weren't diagnosed with
yeah,
anything because of that. Okay.
yeah. I got diagnosed a little bit before I met this boy. So it was very fresh in my diagnosis. I didn't really know what I was doing. My meds weren't working at the time. It was messy and I felt very, very, very alone. And I feel like that's quite common with mentally ill people. And I met a boy who was also equally alone and it felt incredible. And you wouldn't think that two miserable people together would create this like euphoria, but we had this bubble and it was just us and it was beautiful until it wasn't anymore. What happened was we fell into this like cycle of codependency where I couldn't be without him because he became my whole support and he knew that. And to an extent, I was his whole support, but it wasn't like a balanced give and take. I mean, it's the feeling of loneliness is almost like the feeling of loneliness lifting is almost like a high. Like I felt like my first addiction was my boyfriend. That like I have never, and even to this day, and I have done a lot of drugs, I have never felt a pull like I did towards him. That's how powerfully we were connected. And I felt like it was fate. Like this connection was so good and something had dropped him into my life and it was a miracle. And so I couldn't bear to lose him, but I wasn't ready to be in a relationship. And I made that very clear from the beginning. Like we had a date and it was cute. And then I was like, you know what? You've recently been diagnosed. You need to be on your own. You need to learn to be independent. Like this is an important time of your life. Did I listen to myself? No, I didn't. And what happened was the more I pushed for just friendship, the more he wanted romance. And the more he would start saying, well, I can't be your friend if we're not going to be in a relationship. And so it was either date him, be in a relationship with him, or lose my only friend.
It was all or nothing.
All or nothing. And I mean, the thought of losing him, the thought of losing that high that I'd found was crushing. And every few months, I would try to leave. I would say, this isn't working. I can't be your therapist. Like, and that's what I had become to him. Like, he just shared everything with me. And it was too much. And I told him that. And then we'd go 24 hours without talking. And I couldn't do it. I would always go back to him. It would be the most heart-wrenching feeling. I cannot emphasize enough how painful the separation was. But it got worse and worse. It was in that cycle for a long time. Like breakup, I would go off and do silly things at parties. My drinking was escalating during this time. He was encouraging it. In hindsight, I can recognize that. At the time, I thought he was just having fun, like we were just having fun, but he would definitely use alcohol as a tool to like when we fought, we would then get drunk. And so it was like we were fine, we were together. That was when the drinking started to escalate. He would use it as a tool and I didn't recognize that until much later. And I would go out and party and I would have fun and I would flirt with boys. Like I was very much like, I don't know, experiencing some kind of like latent adolescence because I was a teetotaler in high school, no drinking. I thought weed should be illegal forever, like no drugs. I will never be out of control, is what I said.
Hmm.
So then I hit uni and I went a bit wild, and that would make him so angry that when we were on a break, and to be fair, that is a contentious subject, isn't it? We were on a break.
We were on a break. Friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh dear. Well, I thought in my head, because I wanted to get away from him, is the thing. So these little breaks would be me desperately trying to break out of what had become a very abusive relationship. So I would go and I would act out and I would flirt with people that I knew would make him mad. And we would fight. And I became what I thought I was the toxic one because
Mm-hmm.
I would go out and do this flirting and all this stuff. And
Were you hoping he would break up with you then? Like you made it
I
so
don't,
bad that.
wow. Do you know what? I've actually never thought that before. I've never thought that maybe I was pushing him away.
Hmm.
Huh. Interesting.
And when you say abusive, was it emotionally and mentally abusive or just or more just toxic, or was it like physical?
It was emotional for sure. He would call me names and just he would twist me up inside. He would say I was being selfish. He would turn every
Mm.
fight around. Like we would fight a lot about possessiveness because he wouldn't want me to go places. He would get mad if I spoke to my friends. Like, and I was like, I've had enough. You're not my dad. Like, you don't get to control me. And that's a whole nother thing. But like, that's what I would, that's what I would say to him. I was like, you don't have
What?
control here.
So your dad controlled you too?
Well, I mean, come on. I'm so, yeah, there were childhood issues, but
Okay.
I've gone through a lot of therapy and I'm like, okay about that now. So, and I have a brilliant relationship with my whole family. They've been my number one supporters. When they hear that, I want them to know, when they hear this rather, when they hear this, they got to know.
Okay, Dad, she loves you and
Dad,
she's
you're the
over it.
best. I'm over it.
And your dad's been to therapy and he's good now too.
Yeah. So really it's honestly the best case scenario. I can't imagine having a family like that's more willing to support me and support healing than my family. And so I feel quite
Perfect.
lucky in that sense. But anyway,
Okay.
so I would say to him, I would say, you don't have control over me. And he would say, I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to keep you safe. Like, you can't trust these people. These people are only in it to try and date you. These people only like you when you're like glowy, when you're happy. They don't like the real you. And it made me angry, but it also made me doubt myself. Like, maybe he's right. Maybe he's the only one that knows the real me. Maybe I'm not really worth anything to anyone except for him. And that was his way of manipulating me because it meant that he had power. Like, as long as I felt so worthless, he was the one in control. And so that was one of his ways of manipulating. He'd also like buy me presents every time we'd fight over the control issue. He'd like shower me in gifts.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many things that he did, little sneaky things.
Do you think you ever manipulated him?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. I think I did it a lot. And hmm, I think it's what's known as reactive abuse. That's what I've read about it. I'm not sure if that's an actual clinical thing or a psychological. I don't really know, but I would fight back just as dirty. And then I would feel horribly ashamed because that wasn't me. That would just contribute to the feeling of worthlessness because I was a bad person.
You guys just brought out the worst of each other in a way. It was a toxic
Yes.
relationship. It just wasn't a healthy
Yeah,
relationship.
it was toxic. And the longer it went on this breakup makeup pattern for about a year. And then things started to get darker because I was still going out and partying and flirting with people. And that started to make him really, really angry because I was making other friends too. And he was deeply threatened. He would say all sorts of horrible things. And it started escalating to the point of physical violence only on one occasion, but I stayed with him after that. Like, that's how codependent we still were. Anyway, so then we finally cut ties one night. He did the thing where he's super, super depressed and he threatens taking his own life if I don't help him. Or he said I was so selfish that I destroyed him, stuff like that. Like it's your fault. I'm going to die and it's your fault.
Mm-hmm.
And it was horrible. And I begged him. I said, stay alive. What would you do if I killed myself? And he said, it would kill me. And I said, okay, so you can't do that to me. And he said, okay. He promised that night that he would stay alive. And so I went to sleep and I was like, okay. And the next day I called him and I said, never talk to me again. I can't do this anymore. I'm done.
Mm-hmm. You're setting boundaries. You got your own mental health problems.
Yeah, I
That's
did. And he was
that's
making
more
them
than fair.
worse.
That's more than fair.
But you want to know what? I went back again.
Uh-huh.
I'm laughing because it's honestly too ridiculous. Like, looking at my past self, I'm just like, so anyways, I I yeah, I went back and I said I don't think I said these exact words, but I said I'm not going to let you abuse me out of this relationship. Like, I'm not going to, like, if when I leave it's going to be on my terms. Does that make any sense? Not really.
I mean,
But I felt so out of control and I wanted to take back control. I was like, you're not going to take the most important thing out of my life. Like, you're the most important thing and you're not going to take you. Like,
Mm. Mm-hmm. You can't quit. I fire you.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's what it was. Oh. So then I realized that the only way that I was going to get better was to forgive him and move on. And was it true forgiveness? Now looking back, not really. But I texted him and I said, listen, I forgive you for what you did the other week. I forgive you. Please don't talk to me again. And he said, please stay angry at me so you keep talking to me. And if that doesn't sum up our relationship, I don't know
Mm.
what does. Like,
Hmm.
stay unhappy, stay in this toxic place so that I'll still have you.
Wow. That's manipulation.
Yeah. And there was just a period of extreme healing. Like, I kicked my 10-year eating disorder and I was eating it. I threw out my scales. I was done. And
This is my first time hearing about an eating disorder.
oh, I
When
found all of every terrible way to cope. I found it and I tried it.
was that?
Like,
When did the eating disorder start? While you were dating?
oh, when I was like 12.
Oh, I
I
see. Okay.
Yeah, I sort of fell into this pattern of anorexia and then binge eating and then anorexia again. It was I've had moments like it wasn't straight 10 years, but it
Mm-hmm.
was like 10 years of battling this. And I
Mm-hmm.
stopped and I started eating normally and I stopped wearing makeup. It was revolutionary. I turned all the mirrors in my house around and refused to let myself look at myself. Like, I was done with other people being my mirrors, with mirrors being my mirrors. I was going to find myself. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but it
Yeah.
worked.
Yeah.
And I felt this empowerment that I hadn't felt in a long time.
Still drinking and using though.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I didn't think it was a problem at that point, and I wasn't using alone. I was sort of within this party lifestyle, and I knew it was a problem, but I didn't think
I
it.
love when people socially use meth. It's
Yeah.
like that's not really a social drug. If you're using meth, it's kind of a problem.
Yeah, not great,
Anyway.
but I thought it was totally fine, and everyone else did too. So we were just going through life.
Mm-hmm.
But it was euphoric because I was healing and I was so happy, and I kind of let that joy take over. And I like, what could I do to make it better? I know, drink. Like, so the drinking got bad a few months later, um, because he followed through on his threat and he did commit suicide. And I woke up to a video of him, like a note. Have you seen 13 Reasons Why?
No, I kind of refuse to.
Yeah, I watched it to trigger myself, but I don't want to go into the whole story, but basically that, like, he blamed me and I'm still working through it in therapy.
Wait a minute. So the video like showed.
It wasn't graphic, it wasn't
Oh,
his actual death. It was a note
okay.
that he had recorded the night before,
I see. Okay.
and it contained a lot of incredibly damaging things that I had nightmares about for a long time. He did it in an incredibly public way, like it was in the newspapers. It was about as traumatizing as he could make it. And I say he could make it because this was a very calculated thing. I know what it's like. Actually, I don't want to say that. I don't want to go too hard. Like, it is a tragic thing, and it will break my heart forever because he was clearly suffering
Mm-hmm.
to a level that very few people can probably understand. And I can acknowledge that while at the same time saying that what he did was calculated. His words, like, he knew exactly how to wind me up and he did it.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew what I would have to see on a daily basis. And so he used that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I really don't want to get into details, but he planned this out, and
Mm-hmm. He made it the most horrible way for you possible.
the most horrible way.
I know that you at times have blamed yourself. I don't know if you still do or you feel guilt.
Not
Um,
really.
no? Okay. That's good.
No, I've moved on from that.
Good.
EMDR therapy is very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So that event happened, and then I'm
yeah.
assuming your use amplified.
So that was obviously a very severe trauma. And I had a lifestyle already that facilitated a lot of drinking. And I just carried on with that lifestyle, but I upped the ante. Like I was drinking double the amount that I used to, and nobody was really, well, I think people were starting to notice a problem, but a lot of the people that I was hanging out with at the time were big partiers themselves. So many people didn't think it was an issue. So it became a thing of like some of my friends saying, Izzy, slow down. And some of them being like, let's go out, let's party. And I sided with the party people. I was devastated and traumatized, and I had no idea who I was anymore. All of that healing went out the window because he was suddenly back in my life in this enormous way. And he got the last word, you know. And so I was just sort of stuck there, like I couldn't, there was nothing to be done. It was this overwhelming weight. And I couldn't take it. I couldn't take it. So I would drink. I didn't start on drugs, but I would drink and drink and drink and chain smoke weed until I couldn't freaking walk. And that was how I got through it. And I don't think that that was a good way of getting through it, but I was just doing what I knew at the time.
It was a
And
coping mechanism.
yeah, I really had no idea how to handle something like that. I don't, and there was no one that could prepare me for it or really give me guidance, which made the experience more isolating. And eventually I did find other people that had been in abusive relationships and lost people to suicide, but it was difficult to find those people at the time. I didn't have them. And so
And
yeah, I
how
just
long ago
went
was
for it.
this now that you're talking?
This was 2019. Now we get to a happy part of the story, actually. So I went into my very dark spiral and I was drinking all the time. And then I was in a therapy session, and I was in therapy all through this, which is interesting. It didn't really help me because you can't treat trauma while the trauma is happening, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And she said a really impactful thing that worked. She said, Izzy, in a couple of weeks, this isn't going to be about partying. This isn't going to be about like, oh, you're just drinking a little to cope. Like, it's okay. Like, this is going to be about you and an addiction and something you can't break. And at the time, I was 21, and that scared me shitless. Like, because I had never had anyone say to me, Izzy, you're developing an addiction. Like, I had been protected by my little party bubble of thinking it was normal.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she said that, I was like, oh shit. And I didn't sober up immediately. It took about a week for the message to sink in, a week of things getting worse and worse and worse. And I was like, oh my God, she's right. So I stopped. I stopped cold turkey. I was finished. I really thought that. So yeah, I went 7 months, which is longer than I've gone in a long time. But I went to a party again, and I was like, it's Christmas. It's fun. It's it's an occasion. So I had one drink, and then I had two drinks, and then I had 10 drinks, and then I was throwing up everywhere. And then there was another Christmas party, and I was like, well, there's another Christmas party. I'm not going to be like the loser. It's Christmas. So I did it again, and a year later, well, did I ever try and get sober again? I don't even remember. It's all a blur. Like once the drinking got heavy, I don't know if you found this, but once it got heavy, I don't really remember. Like I know I was using a lot, but I don't know what was going on. Did I party? Maybe. I don't know. It's all such a blur.
Mm-hmm. Um, Again, I relate. I quit for a while, and Christmas was the relapse.
Right? It's so difficult. Yeah, I'm gonna be extra on my guard this Christmas. Like I am protecting this freaking sobriety with everything I've got. I am not letting Christmas ruin it.
When the season's
Weirdly.
over, when Christmas is gone and New Year's is over and stuff, it's such an incredible feeling. You're like, holy shit, I did it.
Like, yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this, but like I can't wait for Christmas to be over so the mood gets happy again. Like Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year, except for when it's over.
Yeah. You're
So,
drinking again. You've tried a few times to stop.
party, party, party. The pandemic hit, then I started drinking alone, which wasn't ideal. And they say that you never really know who's going to come out of uni addicted and who's not. Like you're playing Russian roulette when you're doing all this stuff. I was one of the ones that didn't make it out without addiction, and it was kind of difficult to see half my friends not struggling at all. In fact, most of them, they just stopped and I couldn't. And yeah,
Was that noticeable for you? Were you like, wow, what the hell?
I yeah, I was like, this is a huge problem. But I couldn't stop at that point. That was when I started to really realize it was a bigger problem than I had ever thought it was.
Hi, everybody. Just going to take a quick break from the episode that I hope you're enjoying so far to talk about episode 44 with Tara Newell. Now, true crime fans may know Tara. She is the daughter of the victim of Dirty John. Dirty John is a creep, and there's a TV show on Netflix and an HBO documentary all about him and Tara's mother and about Tara. Tara's part of the story is she was attacked by Dirty John, and she managed to get the knife away from him and take his life. I talked to Tara about that. I talked to Tara about her mother's time with him and some of the PTSD and the treatment she's taking now, and just some of the wonderful things she's doing with her life now. So please check out episode 44. And you wanted to stop, but you couldn't?
Yeah,
or you
yeah.
just noticed that?
No.
Okay.
At this point, I noticed it and I was like, it is what it is. The reward is worth it. The reward I get from not feeling, because I was still deeply traumatized. My bipolar episodes were out of control, even with medication. So I needed something to stabilize me. I was self-medicating. And that summer I went home and I lightened up a little bit. And then I moved back to London and I was alone again. I started experiencing a lot of chronic pain, and I went to a doctor because it was getting horrible. I don't know. I have hypermobility things. So basically my joints are a little loose sometimes, and it is very painful. So I went to a doctor and I was like, can you help me with this? And he was like, oh, absolutely. You have this here, have some benzos and some opiates. And I was like, are you sure? I said to him, and this is a trend, which I would like to talk about at some point, of doctors ignoring concerns or ignoring patients, which is a big thing. I said to him, I have bipolar and I'm worried about addiction. Don't these have addictive potential? And he was like, not at this dose, and then proceeded to give me 30 of them. And I went nuts. I loved it.
Well, maybe not at that dose, but if you give them a whole pile of that
well,
dose.
Exactly. Like, here, have all of this. And I know in hindsight that I can't imagine a doctor prescribing both of those at once and just saying, just go, be on your own. Like, here, don't worry about the risks. He didn't tell me any of them.
Even though you mentioned your own
Even
concerns.
though I brought up my concerns, he was
boy.
like, not an issue. And then I left, and I was very unhappy at this time. I wasn't, like, the pandemic had hit. I was alone a lot, and yeah, so I just lost it. I was blacking out all the time. I did not care about anything anymore. I mean, I feel like every person with an addiction knows this part of the story. It just gets grim. There's just a lot of using, a lot of forgotten days. Trying to get sober again, though. I realized that December, after I'd been taking the pills for, like, I don't even remember how long, because I was starting to get really suicidal.
Were you running out of the meds and starting to buy street drugs at this point too, or?
No, I had plenty. In fact, I gave the rest to my friends. Basically, I had a realization, because of a number of factors, that it was becoming a really big problem. It was pretty hard to ignore, though. Like, I was waking up, like, I woke up, I didn't know where I was. Like, it was not good. And my friends literally, like, came into my house and they were like, give them to me. I will not leave until you give them to me. I have very persistent friends. Thank freaking God. Like, I don't know where I would be.
A bit of an intervention then.
A little bit, yeah. But I was the one, to be fair, that encouraged the intervention. Like, I didn't really fight it. He was like, I'm taking these, and I was like, please no. And he was, I'm taking them. I was like, okay. Like, there was a little bit of resistance, but not really, because I knew it was the right thing. I knew that I was driving myself to rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted that. And I think that's like part of me knew it was a problem. Part of me was reaching for help and doing the right things. But the traumatized part of me was chasing rock bottom. I don't know if that's a shared experience. Is that, have you?
I mean, I've never heard it put that way, but I can relate. I think it's fair to say that yeah, you there's like two of you, right? There's the addiction you, and then there's Izzy, and Izzy was like, "Holy shit, this is a problem," and addicted you was like, "Oh, but we might feel something from the trauma," and no, but so yeah, the seeds are starting to be planted of, oh, I want to get sober. This is too much.
Yeah, yeah, it was too. And but there was a distinct part of me that was like, you aren't bad enough, you deserve to suffer more. And
Hmm.
this is something that I haven't actually heard a lot of people talk about, so I don't know if it's a relatable thing, but the urge to self-destruct was so strong that I don't quite know how to put it, but in my twisted state, so I extremely traumatized, nobody knew I had PTSD, I was a wreck, and I wanted to be addicted. I wanted that horror in my life. I thought that I deserved that. And so I drove myself deeper. And I have journal entries where one side of the page is me saying, pull out, like don't do this, like stop. And the other side is saying, go deeper. I was like, stop this nonsense. You need to escape this spiral. Get out. And the other part of me was like, you need to be worse. You need to screw up your life so badly that there is no coming back, because that is exactly what you deserve.
I think that is a common thing. I
I
think it
know.
is. I mean, that's what the fucking disease is, right? The disease
Yeah.
is progressive. So never had someone that's addicted ever say, "Okay, this is enough." You know,
Yeah.
I. This is about. I think we peaked. Let's just stay here. I think it's always let's get worse, 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 worse.
Yeah.
I remember having
Yeah.
fantasies about dying alone on a beach, just drunk. Like I've destroyed my family to the point that nobody wants to be my friend, and I'm just gonna die drunk and high somewhere in the streets. And I romanticize that. I romanticize it to the
Yeah.
point it was like, yeah, that's a cool way to go. Like, well like the movie, not Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. The other one where he goes to Las Vegas on purpose to drink himself to death.
I've never heard of that. But it sounds like something I would do.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway,
So, yeah.
again,
And I
textbook.
pretty much, yeah, I relentlessly made myself worse. I don't know why. I wrote in my journal, like, this is the path I'm choosing. I'm choosing addiction. And everyone says addiction isn't a choice. And for a long time, I was like, no, you don't understand. It was my choice. And that's what makes me so different and so messed up in the head. Like, how could I possibly choose this path that has destroyed so many people's lives? Now, reflecting on it, I can kind of see that I was so like, to be that mentally messed up, like nobody would make that choice.
No.
So I was so far gone and so sick that I was making choices that weren't really choices.
Mm-hmm. That's right. You were taken over by the disease, plain
Yeah.
and simple.
Yeah, it was not a choice.
No.
This isn't a revelation. Like most people know addiction isn't a choice, but for me, I thought that I guess was uniquely awful, and that like I was just this despicable person. I didn't think that my version of the I don't know. I didn't think that my addiction was worse than other people's, but I thought I was worse. And that was very isolating. Yeah, so after that, I just drove myself deeper and deeper. And this is the really boring part of the story. Like, I, yeah, I was just drinking a lot. Something that I actually always felt insecure about during this period, though, and I'm not sure if this is a shared experience either, but I never thought that my addiction was bad enough. Like, because other people had it worse, and I was like, oh well, I'm only drinking this much, I'm not drinking that much, so I'm not worthy of help, I don't need help, I'm fine, I'm
Izzy,
making this all up.
Izzy, everything you're saying is exactly what every addict says.
Yeah,
Or you
and
know
I didn't
someone,
realize that.
yeah, or you know someone else that's like, oh, that guy drinks way more than I do. I don't need. It's not how much someone drinks; it's what the drinking is doing to you.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
And for the longest time, I would say I'm not a real addict. I have what print quotation marks. I am not a real addict.
God, I was in treatment thinking, I don't know if I'm an addict. How the
Yeah,
fuck did I get
count.
the treatment?
Exactly. I'm in a psych ward saying like, oh, I made this up. Like, I don't actually have bipolar. Like, I'm fine. Like, what?
No one
What?
mistakenly goes to treatment or to a psych ward.
Yeah, no, it doesn't happen. Like, what? And I look back and I'm like, Jesus Christ. Spiral, start getting into, oh my God, it's such a long story. I honestly am getting bored of myself. I feel like that there are so many experiences that like we all have that. I mean, maybe it's not just people who have addictions that are listening. So I say we all, like everybody gets it. Perhaps not.
So when did you decide, because you've been sober-ish off and on, you've been trying really hard this last 7 months or something like that, what inspired you? What was the breaking point that you're like, okay, this fucking time I'm really going to try? Was there an event or anything, or was it just you got sick of feeling like shit?
I got sick of feeling like shit. A switch flipped in my head, and I had gone to my graduation party. So I got my master's degree. I fought through it. I did this all during active addiction, not to brag, but like this should have been a moment when I was celebrating. And I was drunk and high at my aunt's house. Nobody knew. All my friends were there. It was supposed to be a really beautiful occasion. And I was just out in the garden smoking cigarettes. Like, or I was at the table, but I don't remember the conversations, which is just horrible. And I woke up the next morning and I was like, oh, I still have half a bottle of vodka. I may as well finish that. And then when I was done with that, I was like, what are you doing? What? Come on, this is enough. And that's the last time I drank.
Was your grad? The day after your grad? Nice.
The day after the party.
Right.
I was like,
yeah.
Yeah, because I had been using. Yeah, it was not a good week, and I had been using the whole week with my family right there. Like I'd be sneaking off into the bathroom at the freaking museum, like.
And doing what? What drug? Do you mind me asking?
Coke. I had got onto that like last summer, and this was this. I don't remember. It's all very blurry. But yeah, so I would like sneak off to the bathroom in a freaking museum, and I look at myself. I was like, what? With your parents right there, like, what are you doing? They came all the way to this country to visit you, and here you are. Like, what are you doing? So yeah, and then that Sunday, I was like, I've had enough.
What's the process for you to stay sober and get sober? Like for me, I went to treatment and I went to AA meetings, and I haven't been to an AA meeting in years because of COVID and stuff. But you know, I have my own thing. What is your thing? What tools have you been using?
I mean, first of all, therapy. That's my first and highest recommendation to anybody. Yeah, getting a good therapist is a literal lifesaver. So I highly recommend. If you've tried therapy before and don't like it, you might have had the wrong therapist, so it's not necessarily worth giving up on. I would just like to say that. So yeah, therapy was the big one. I also started attending SMART recovery meetings in August of last year. So I was attending for like almost a year before I actually got sober. And for most of that time, I was like, yeah, no, I'm not, screw these tools. I don't care about them.
What is SMART recovery exactly? Well, not exactly, but
it's basically AA, but instead of 12 steps, they base their tools in like cognitive behavioral therapy type things. So it's much more rooted in psychology, and it stands for self-management and recovery training. And I found it as an alternative to AA because I tried AA and NA. I was going through these things all through my addiction. I would just try a meeting here and there. I started going to SMART recovery and I stuck around because they were nice, and I liked talking about myself. It was nice to go to meetings and finally be able to share these experiences, even if I was still actively using. it was nice to have that community. And so by the time I got sober, I had this whole workbook. I had all of these tools lined up. I was ready. I was equipped. So that was really important. And so there's so many tools. Do you want me to talk about the specific tools, or I'll talk about one, which has been the one that I think I have used the most. It's called Play the Tape, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's just going through step by step and writing out every single thing that's going to happen if you use, because like what's going to happen. And it's one thing to be like, yeah, okay, whatever, I'm going to have a bad come down, like it'll be fine. And it's another thing to write down, like, okay, so I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to feel like this for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to feel like doing it and forcing your brain to confront all those hard truths. Mm-hmm. It was really important for me. So I highly recommend that tool.
Mm-hmm. You do use marijuana regularly still, or you were?
Yeah, I do. That's a whole thing. I am really tired of it. I am trying to quit. But yes, I'm Cali sober.
Right.
That's what they call it.
And, like for me, weed was a big part of my addiction, which is fine. That was me. It's in a lot of ways, I think marijuana is a harm reduction tool. So if you are constantly suicidal because you're doing meth and coke and fentanyl, whatever, and then you settle on marijuana, like if you're able to live and somewhat be stable on marijuana, then, I guess that's just as good as what's the drink?
Methadone?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So some people use methadone, some people use weed. Yeah. It's all harm reduction, right? So yeah, exactly. I don't have a strong feeling either way, but
yeah, I absolutely support like treatment assisted therapy or whatever, medication assisted treatment, I think is what they call it. Mm-hmm. And I was on naltrexone for a while, which is like it blocks your opioid receptors.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So they had no impact.
And so yeah, that's fine too. But I mean, in theory, you try to get off of those things at some point too. So yeah. So you're at the point where like weed is starting to even be annoying?
Yeah. I'm tired of always being high. I feel like sometimes like I'm a liar. Like I am not really sober, because weed is a big part of my addiction too. And yes, it is harm reduction. Yes, I am much more stable with it, but I'm sick of always being high.
Yeah. Like, I mean, when you're ready, you could be even more stable without it.
I know, right?
And it drives me nuts when people say you can't get addicted to weed. I just want to fucking lose my shit.
Do not get me started. I have quit everything, but I cannot quit weed. And it's half because people say it's not a drug. It's half because I say it's not a drug. In my own head, I'm like, it's just weed. When I should be like, this is weed. This is a psychoactive substance you are taking to numb your feelings. Maybe this is a problem. Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, you're aware.
It's very straight.
Yeah. It's you're getting tired of it.
It's odd to be self-aware in that sense.
But recently you went to the hospital after a relapse?
I did indeed. It wasn't actually after a relapse. It was before a relapse.
Oh.
I went as a preventative thing because I was starting to think more seriously about overdosing on purpose. And I was like, okay, this is a red flag. What do we do when we have like these warning signs? We take ourselves to the hospital. I say we because I have many parts in my head. That's something we will talk about that in just a moment. But we're going to get ourselves to the hospital and we're going to get care. And I show up and they put me in the waiting room. I tell them what's going on. They put me in the waiting room and I'm by myself and I am resisting as hard as I can because the urge is showing up to go and overdose. And I got in this pattern of overdosing sort of last September. I did it like 3 different times and I kind of liked the hospital routine. And I was familiar, like I knew exactly what would happen if I overdosed. And so I was like, well, I'm here. Like I'll just go overdose and come back, which is very mentally ill looking at it now. That is not a normal thought process. Like, well, I'm here. I'll go and come back once I'm poisoned and dying.
No, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's probably a mental health issue there.
Yeah. It sounds like it. So I fought it for as long as I could. I asked them How much longer is it going to be? And I was really doing my best. I was fighting because there's this part of my brain that takes over when I overdose. And it's just like, that is the only thing I can think about. And I was fighting out loud with myself as I was leaving the hospital. I would stop in the street and say, turn around, like, go back, do not do this, go back, get help. And I couldn't do it. I lost that fight. I overdosed, came back. I only got halfway through the packet this time. Like I won. So it was less bad than it could be, but I went in and I was like, guys, I just overdosed. I'm really struggling. And this is the part where I get mad because I was there holding a box of pills, half taken. And they said, go sit down in the waiting room and we'll get someone. And so I did. I sat down for another 5 minutes and then I had to go back up because I was ready to kill myself at that point. I had half overdosed. I was ready to go and buy more. Like at that point, I was so out of control and I was starting to get high because I had taken a mix of paracetamol and codeine. So it was just a mess. And I I went back to them and I was like, you have to help me or I am going to go and do this again. And they, they were like, okay. And I had to say, you need someone to stand with me. Like, will you just watch me from the reception desk? Like, you need to care for me. And that is not the first time I've been in a situation of having to advocate for myself while I'm dying. And so anyway, I went in.
It's a fucking epidemic across the world.
It's truly awful. And the strength that they expect us to have as mentally ill people, like I shouldn't be teaching my doctor how to do their job. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't have to have half overdose, or it wasn't overdose. It just wasn't as severe as it could have been. But I shouldn't be going out and overdosing when I come in. But I don't know. I can't solve the mental health care system.
Yeah,
but
it is a thing though that needs to be changed and talked about.
Someday I'm going to talk about it. I have a lot to say, but what actually back to the addiction part.
Yeah,
I had taken cocodamol, which has codeine in it, and I went on TikTok live after I had gotten out of the hospital and they'd done whatever treatment and I was okay again. And I said, guys, this just happened to me. I was just in the hospital. This is horrible. I have a tendency to overshare. And does this count as a relapse? Because I wasn't really high and I was doing it to overdose, not to get high. And like, I mean, I was a little high, but I wasn't, the intent wasn't there. I was intending to overdose. And everyone said, yes, it does count. And then half the people, well, okay, I don't know. Some of the people said, no, of course, it's not a relapse. Like, be gentle with yourself. It's not a big deal. You had a little slip up. It's going to get better. And some people said, yes, it's a relapse. And of course, my brain latched onto that because I am programmed to dislike myself and think the worst of myself. So I was like, yes, you relapse. This is it. And that created an opportunity because I was on day 0 again. And so I could just be on day 0 for a couple of days. No one's going to notice. Mm-hmm. So then it became much more of a relapse.
So you got high again then?
Yeah. I went and bought Coke and yeah, because I had the opportunity.
Right.
No one was
like, well, I've already relapsed, so what the hell?
Exactly. Yeah. What the hell? Why not? Just one more for the road. Like, but
I mean, in my opinion, I don't think it. Who fucking cares how many days?
Well, exactly. And now looking at it, I realize that I let myself get way too vulnerable, I think, to other people's opinions. And in sobriety, it's so important to not care about other people's opinions.
Absolutely.
That's what I think, at least.
What I was told many times in treatment is, what other people think of you is none of your business.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love it because I get, you get into that trap. It's like, oh God. And then it's like, wait. And then I think of that and it's like, wait a minute. What the fuck do I care what you think of me? It's none of my business. You go ahead, think that about me. I don't care.
Yeah. And I should have been like that. But
and something I wanted to talk about was your TikTok account. Like, it's Izzy sober. No, what's it called?
Sober Izzy XOXO.
Right. And you go live twice a day.
Yeah.
And that's like your meeting, and that's your kind of like your AA meeting, whatever, which is great. So that's one of the tools you use to communicate
Yeah.
with people and to get sober and to stay sober, which is
Yeah.
awesome. But then
Ooh.
you get a couple people
Yeah.
plant seeds in your brain and then you start beating yourself up, and then you want to,
Yep.
yeah. So it's a slippery slope. It's I guess you have to get better at not. I don't know how to do this, but take the positivity and not let those people get into you.
Yeah, it's so easy to fixate on the negative comments. That's something that I'm trying to separate myself more in like my real life, so to speak. Again, air quotes, real life from the TikTok life, because I really don't want to let comments like that get to me. Or people will come on and say like, "Oh, you're just crying. You just want attention." Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I latch onto that, and I'm like, "Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing." And it's not
So
about that. So.
just be careful with it. Don't let it,
Yeah.
because it is an amazing platform, but it's also a horrible platform. So yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yep.
I remember watching you were reading poetry one night,
Oh my gosh,
and
yes.
everybody was, it was just like 300 people said, "Oh, what a wonderful poem," and one person was like, "I didn't care for it," and that was it. And it was like,
I
that's the
lost it.
one you latched onto, and it's so
Hmm.
yeah. I know, but I get it. I get it. I'd be the same way. It's like, but I want everyone to like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I haven't really experienced like having this kind of community, especially on this scale. It's all very new, and I think it's beautiful. I really,
Definitely can
I
be,
yeah,
yeah.
I think overall the experience has been much more positive than negative. I think without TikTok and the support I've got on there, I wouldn't have stayed sober through the summer. There's merit in being like, I do not want to post another relapse video. I do not. I'm tired of recording those. That's embarrassing, and I don't want to do it anymore. And that motivates me. So I think there's merit, and it's kind of like accountability, I would say.
Right,
Like,
right. It's like a meeting, yeah. It's like,
yeah,
yeah.
people are looking out, and
And you get a lot of regulars, me
yeah, it's
included.
very sweet. Yeah, it's incredible.
A lot of it's by chance. Like I go on TikTok before bed. Like I go on there for about 20 minutes, and that's when you're eating breakfast. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, she's there
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so heartwarming. I love it when people they'll come in and like drop their sober dates or say like, "Oh, I'm getting sober now. Like I had one day, I had 3 days." And it's so wonderful not just to get to hear the stories, but to see other people in the chat supporting those people. Like there's a real sense of connection. It's like it's bigger than me at this point. Like
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I and not to sound too like full of myself, but
No,
that's
no.
sort of what it's grown into.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. The sober community is very supportive of each other. It is. And
Yeah.
it's amazing. Um, I know you've said a few times on your lives that you just really want to help other people too. You want to inspire other people to just be
Yeah.
careful. Don't put a lot of responsibility or a lot of pressure on yourself. You got to do you as well. But
Yeah.
you're doing really well, and I'm super proud of you. Yeah.
It's not been easy. I have a lot of
No.
feelings.
Oh, it's not easy.
It's not easy. I'm still working out how to get them out best. I don't know if you have had this experience of like just this explosion of feelings in sobriety and like there's no like I want to say more. Like I feel compelled to share a lot. I don't know. Did that happen to you? Like you just want to tell everybody like
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a phenomenon called the pink cloud. Have you ever heard of that?
Okay. Yeah, I have heard of that.
Yeah, a lot of people come
It's
out of treatment. They're like, ah, it's like, and then,
yeah.
as quickly as they are excited about their sobriety and they go out and they want to tell everyone, they not even go to meetings, they chair the meetings and they get super involved, and then they relapse and boom, they're just like, they crash harder than they ever were before. And it's like, yeah, it's a bit like bipolar. It's like you have to regulate it in a bit. It's like, don't get
Yeah.
too manic with my sobriety, because then it can come crashing down, and then I'll be on the other side of it. It's like slow and steady wins the race, but at the same time, you don't want to like you're like, oh, I'm feeling too good that I'm sober. Of course you want to feel good about being sober and be proud of yourself and stuff, um, but yeah, it can be, again, a slippery slope and a little dangerous. So, um,
Yeah. good advice.
And for me, I mean, I just recently this summer or this spring started dealing with some emotions, some trauma that I had as a kid. And I was like 5.5 years sober. I've been on meds forever. I've been seeing psychologists and therapists for like 10 years, and it's still just starting to come out. It's like I wasn't healthy enough, or I wasn't stable enough to talk about some of this real heavy shit. So patience. You are a work in progress. The Rome wasn't built in a day, they say.
I always wish it were. That's an addicted person thing. Immediate gratification. That is, and I want it in every area of my life. That's not how the world works, but I want it.
Yeah. And it's all or nothing.
Yep. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's all or nothing. Yeah. I want it now.
Yep.
Yeah. That's, I think partly the disease too. It wants you to fail. It's just sitting there waiting. It's like, come on, Izzy, fuck up. But you're doing amazing. And sharing your story and doing it on that platform is amazing. It's incredible watching you.
Thank you.
It's like, yeah, it's weird. It's like I know you, but this is our first time actually talking. But
yeah. Well, I mean, you've been watching for a while, and I do relentlessly spill my guts, like
twice a day,
every day. And yeah, I think I would have liked to see someone. And there are people, and I'm not saying, I'm the only person speaking up about this, but I would have liked to see more people talking about this when I was going through it, when I was a teenager. And so I'm trying to be that voice. I'm trying to be as open as possible so that people know that, like, see, I don't want to say it's okay not to be okay. Like, you're not alone in feeling that depth of emotion.
Thank you so much, Izzy. Now, most of you probably wouldn't know this, but Izzy was super nervous. She's still super nervous about recording this episode. And I can't tell you enough, Izzy, just how charming and just how wonderful you are, how harrowing your story is, and just how proud I am of you. And you did wonderful. I think this is a really, really great episode. So don't worry. You did great. You can check out Izzy on TikTok, Sober Izzy XOXO. You can check out her lives twice a day. And yeah, you can follow her journey and cheer her on, or you can relate to her and leave wonderful comments. Super, super great girl. And don't forget to check out next week's episode with Haley Rose. We are just catching up and talking about our lives and some of the wacky mental health issues we're having. After that episode, I'm going to give you another update on Haley. When we recorded this episode, she was in a bit of a slump, and so I'm going to give you an update about her after that. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, please make your beds and take your meds. Bye.